Okay, we're live.
Okay, great. Hey, thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the special meeting of the Weston Board of Education. Tonight, agenda is formal presentation of the fiscal year 2023 budget. First, I'd like to thank Superintendent Wallach, the administration, and the entire staff for all the work they put in putting together the proposed budget for next year. For those of you who are listening or watching from home, this is first of a series of meetings. Tonight is a formal presentation. Over the course of January, we will have several workshops where we will dig into the budget in much more detail and deliberate over the budget. The Board of Ed is required by the end of January to vote on a proposed budget that we will then pass on to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen will then review the budget and make recommendations to the Board of Finance. The Board of Selectmen does not have a final say on the budget, but they do have a recommendation that they pass on to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance will in February and March will be reviewing the proposed budget that the Board of Ed voted on and passed on. And at the end of their deliberation, we'll have a final recommendation for our budget. The vote for the Board of Finance actually does not have a line item veto on the Board of Ed budget, but they do have an overall vote on the whole number, and then it's up to us to make sure that we allocate that number appropriately as we see fit. That's for the operating budget. For the capital budget, they do have a line item veto on those items. So I just wanted to describe a little bit of the process in January and February before we go to a final referendum on the budget that the Board of Finance votes on. So tonight, I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Wallach to present, to do the formal presentation of the budget. I would, for the Board of Ed members, what I would recommend is that we hold off on questions until Lisa finishes the presentation. This evening, I would suggest that we hold our questions or limit our questions to the actual presentation. And then in tomorrow's workshop, starting at 9, we'll dig into the book, starting with the first section and moving on. But then again, if there's questions you want to ask this evening after the presentation, we're not limiting it to anything, but I think that it would probably be best to limit it to the presentation, and then we can kind of dig in on the details starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. So let me hand it over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, Dan DeVito. Dan DeVito is going to handle our slide presentation. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. So good evening. I also would like to begin by thanking both the central office and school administration, the curriculum instructional leaders, the program leaders, and the support staff that worked to create my first budget as superintendent of schools. It's been quite an experience. The purpose of this evening is for me to explain our request of almost $57 million to support teaching and learning in the town of Weston. As Weston superintendent, next, I have two critical responsibilities. First and foremost, I must ensure that the budget fulfills the community's expectations for its children. Weston Public Schools is one of the highest achieving school districts in both the state and nation. Our schools are known for its level of personalization that our district staff strives to give every child every day. I also share my responsibility of fiscal responsibility with you, members of the Board of Ed, to the town of Weston. You have entrusted me with the task of maximizing every dollar in this budget so that the district's highest aspirations for its children are met without financially overburdening its citizens. The district and school administration painstakingly built this budget on the foundation of the portrait of a Weston graduate, which is the culmination of our students' pre-K-12 journey in Weston. I am immensely proud of our district mission and what we accomplish for our children. At our schools, Weston students become critical and creative thinkers. They learn to solve problems and develop skills to effectively communicate and collaborate with others. They study math, science, language arts, social studies, world language, fine and performing arts, health, PE. They demonstrate the ability to care for themselves and others, and they learn to love theater, sports, community service, and participate in a myriad of clubs and activities. At every grade level and every school, Weston's children thrive, becoming young men and women prepared for their lives beyond Weston. Dr. Craw.
Thank you, Lisa, and good evening, everyone. I have the next 4 slides, and I just would like to highlight the excellence in academics that's produced through the support of the resources that the past budgets have provided. You could see a list of highlights here of several outcomes that we just want to bring to your attention. Obviously, you know, Weston is a high-performing school district with a long tradition of excellence. It was recognized this past year in the top level of U.S. News and World Report for public high schools in Connecticut. That's been a long-standing recognition. We have a faculty that's very highly educated and skillful at what they do at creating innovative experiences for students. 99% have master's degrees, and many of them have earned degrees beyond that. We, just highlighting a couple more, if you look at graduation rate last year, 99% of our students graduated, and obviously during a difficult pandemic year. If we look at standardized assessments, very strong. This is the school day SAT results at the well above the average of the DERG. And so, you know, just highlighting there what the resources and the human resources have been able to support in Weston, this longstanding tradition. Next slide. And historically, you can see that this trend over the past 5 years has been very consistent. If you look at, you know, the K-12 experience, and when students are applying to colleges, we have, you know, a third of our students on average admitted to the most competitive colleges and universities. And this past year, even higher than that at 44%. And if you look at the number of students admitted to highly competitive schools, over 50%, and again, even higher this past year. And at the bottom there, just highlighting the wide variety of courses, AP courses that are wonderfully demanding at our high school, showing that a small, highly personalized school system continues to provide and consistently provide comprehensive opportunities for students at high levels. And we see the participation is regularly above the 70% level for our students. And you know, 85 to 90% score at a 3 or higher on at least one exam. And that's just a testament to the system working together and the support of the community. Next slide. Of course, and as Lisa has mentioned, beyond the academics that I've just mentioned here, the visual and performing arts program, arts are critically important in Weston. And if you take a look at that first cell, over 40% of our students, 900 students in grades 4 through 12, participate in our music ensembles. And so obviously in Weston, there's a strong commitment to the arts. And you can see listed there, I won't go through them, list of the recognitions in music, theater, and visual arts. And this upcoming budget continues to support in theater the 4 musical productions, beginning 1 at WIS, 1 at the middle school, and 2 at the high school. So we continue that tradition. And my last slide. I'm so pleased to have the honor to present also the athletic highlights, which, you know, if I could just read some statistics for you on behalf of Mark Berkowitz. I think it's really telling the consistency we have in Weston of our student athletes. So in the past 15 years, we've had 75 state championship teams. That's on average 5 state championships a year. We've had 103 conference championship teams. That's over 7 each year, and 707 all-state athletes, which is about 48 a year. And so, you know, I think beyond those accomplishments, which are amazing, the fact that, you know, 70% of our students are involved in at least one sport, we know the benefits of that. And students are much more disciplined. They often are even, you know, doing better in school because they're in season. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And again, you know, we value both the core curriculum as well as the additional experiences, which are essential for our students' growth and development. So with that, I return it to you, Lisa. We can't hear you, Lisa.
Sorry. And we also wanted to just make mention of our student opportunities, where students really, you know, explore their passions and interests. These are just a sampling of all of the clubs that we have, primarily in the middle school and high school, that also start as young as the intermediate school. It really is quite impressive. Next slide. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. Our proposed operating budget is just shy of $57 million, which represents an increase of 3.48 or $1,900,000 from the 2022 budget. It should be noted that the increase includes $434,000 or 0.79% for the funding of dental claims. These claims prior to this budget had been funded from the town's internal services fund in the 2022 budget. And without this change in funding source, the budget increase would be $1,481,799, which represents an increase of 2.69. We felt it important to incorporate it in the operating budget, and we will discuss that a little bit later. Tonight, we will talk about budget drivers. They include enrollment, salaries and benefits, and special education costs. We'll look at operating costs, the capital budget requests to address our facility needs. And I'll give an overview of the grant monies that we receive to supplement our budget and how it specifically addresses those goals. But first, before we look at the tables and the charts and the spreadsheets that Mr. Cross has so painstakingly put together, I want to talk to you about our goals as a district, about teaching and learning, about the through line right into the classroom in each school where the magic of the Weston Public Schools takes place. How do these requests connect specifically to our district goals? So here are our goals. To support Weston's portrait of the graduate, which begins at Hurlbut, to improve our student academic performance, especially to ensure that students demonstrate growth in math and reading, to promote an inclusive climate where the uniqueness of every individual is honored, to provide students with appropriate social emotional supports, to fulfill our responsibilities to our students with disabilities, to support the maintenance, safety, and security of our campus, and to really maximize the financial resources through the lens of the academic return on investment. Next slide. It's also important to understand the federal grants that support teaching and learning for a total of $1,120,000. Titles 1, 2, and 4 are federal funds designed to improve academic performance, to provide training for teachers, and to support district initiatives. These are annual grants. IDEA and the IDEA preschool is specifically designed to support special education in terms of certified staff and instructional paraprofessionals. That's almost $500,000 in that grant. And finally, the Esser, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. That's the federal funding that was established to address the impact of COVID-19 and its adverse effects on our students. This is the second of a 3-year emergency relief fund. And you can see right there, it's $345,434. And then the SPED Esser is $175,000. Our Esser funding in this year too will continue to be used for academics and SPED support. We are really very fortunate to have these Esser fundings as we continue to have significant needs, especially in the areas of math and reading. These funds will be continued to be used for the additional reading and math interventionists that we put in place this year. The $345,000 is the equivalent, if it were in the operating budget, of an additional 0.6, which would have frankly brought the budget over 4%. We need these interventions for our students, and our commitment is to ensure that this funding does not become part of the operating budget at the end of this grant. The SPED Esser, as I mentioned, is used for SPED services. Those SPED services include things like contracted services, a small amount for SPED transportation, and to defray tuition costs. Next slide. So our principals now will give you an overview of each school, connecting our requests with our specific district goals. And you will also see where these requests are supported by any specific grant funding. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Hurlbut Elementary School Principal, Laura Cadis.
Thank you, Lisa. The district budget supports the mission and goals of Hurlbut Elementary School, home to Weston's youngest learners in pre-K, kindergarten, first and second grade. The curriculum and instructional program is designed around 22 sections of grades K1 and 2 next year. And we are budgeted for 22 sections to maintain the following Board of Ed class size guidelines. Kindergarten and first grade is between 18 and 20 students, and second grade between 20 and 24 students. We also have 3 sections of preschool. Ensuring a strong foundation of learning is supported in this budget. For math, we have proposed reallocating funding for the math curriculum instructional leader, that's our CIL for math, from the Esser grant to the operating budget. This is accomplished by reallocating the current CIL position funding from federal grant monies to the district operating budget and reallocating a portion of the district math intervention monies to Esser. There is also proposed maintaining 1 full-time math interventionist and 1 instructional paraprofessional so that all students demonstrate growth and deepen their conceptual understanding of math and develop their problem-solving skills. This year, our first and second grade students had new math resources. The budget for next year proposes new digital and consumable math resources for all of our kindergartners so that all of our students at Hurlbut will have these materials. It is also to provide targeted professional development in math so that all of our teachers continue to grow in their skills and practice in teaching math. Reading, of course, is a foundational skill, and it is of primary importance that at Hurlbut, we teach students how to read and we do it early and we do it well. So we have proposed maintaining 2 full-time reading interventionists and 1 instructional paraprofessional, so that all students are on track to achieve reading proficiency by the end of 3rd grade. Reflected in this budget is the purchase of a combination of grade level and independent reading books for the classrooms and our library, and to continue to provide targeted professional development in reading, which all of our teachers teach. In the digital learning and technology portion, we have proposed providing all of our kindergartners with new iPads. The current iPads no longer support the applications that we need to use. We are also proposing the purchase of appropriate educational software to support our academic goals, including Lexia, Dreambox, BrainPop, and our Fountas and Pinnell reading materials. It will also ensure that we have enough teacher licenses for the data analytics program, Tableau, to support monitoring all students' academic growth across the school. Next slide, please. The special education portion fulfills our responsibilities for students with individualized education plans and supports the position of a district-wide school psychologist to assist in the increased testing demands across school. In the pupil personnel services portion, we support this budget supports the unique social, emotional, and academic development of our earliest elementary learners by reallocating the cost of 1 of 2 school psychologists to staff a school social worker. Healthy learning environment is necessary at Hurlbut so we can ensure that all of our students who are entering school for the first time and begin their journey through the Weston Public Schools at Hurlbut form positive habits and attitudes about learning and school. We are proposing a slight increase in our lunch and recess supervision to ensure that we have appropriate levels of supervision across lunch and recess. And that is an increase from 1.2 to a 1.6 FTE. This budget also supports our inclusive climate by supporting our PBIS program, that's our positive behavioral interventions and supports, and by ensuring a strong sense of community within grade levels and across the school by funding our team leader stipends. At this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Balber, principal of Weston Intermediate School.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about our proposed budget for next year. Next year, we are anticipating that there is a slight decrease in the projected enrollment. However, because there is a shift in where the enrollment numbers fall, we are proposing a reduction of 1 section in grade 5, which will bring us to 21 sections in grade 3 through 5, 7 in each grade level, which will continue to maintain the Board of Ed class size guidelines of 20 to 24 students. To support our continued focus in math, we are proposing to maintain the staffing levels of 1.5 math interventionists, 0.7 of which will come from the operating budget and 0.8 from the Esser grant, and 1 paraprofessional, so that all of our students will continue to demonstrate growth and to deepen their conceptual understanding of math and develop their problem-solving skills. In this budget, there is a decrease in the math budget, as we do not need to purchase consumable math workbooks for grades 3 through 4, as they will be provided through our purchase last year of a 6-year subscription to Math in Focus. We will be continuing to provide targeted professional development through the operating budget, as well as through Title II and Esser money, and to support stipends for both Math Olympiads and Odyssey of the Mind, which we are really hopeful that we can bring Odyssey of the Mind back next year. Reading continues to be a very important focus for us in the grades 3 through 5, as those are the years where students are really honing their reading skills and moving from that learning to read to reading to learn. So our goal is to maintain 2 full-time reading interventionists to ensure the continued growth and development of our students' reading comprehension and decoding skills. And this cost comes from our operating budget as well as through Title I. We are also going to be purchasing a combination of grade level, small group, and independent reading books for all 3 grade levels, as well as science periodical for our grade 5 students to support reading for information goal. We are also hoping to update the book collection for our library learning center with high interest titles as well. And will continue to provide targeted professional development in reading through both the operating budget and Title II. For our digital learning and technology goals, we are budgeting to ensure that we have appropriate educational software available for our students, such as Extra Math, Faunus and Pinnell, Lexia for reading, Scholastics Go and Pebble Go for our library learning center, as well as programs such as Mystery Science, Music Play, and Noodle Tools. We are also proposing to increase the number of smart displays, also known as smart boards, in our classrooms, and ensure an appropriate number of teacher licenses for the data analytics program, known as Tableau, which supports the monitoring of our students' academic growth at scale. Next slide. In special education, we are really truly mindful in making sure that we're building the budget to ensure that we are fulfilling our responsibilities to our students with individualized education plans. We also support the position of a district-wide school psychologist to assist in the increased testing demands across the schools, which will be coming from the Esser funds. Our budget also maintains the staffing levels of 1 school psychologist and 1 school counselor to meet the social and emotional needs of our students. Lastly, but very importantly, we are dedicated to promoting and ensuring a healthy learning environment for our students and our staff. Some of the ways that we will support this goal is to maintain appropriate levels of supervision at lunch and recess, promote an inclusive climate that honors the uniqueness of every individual through positive behavioral interventions and supports program, commonly known as PBIS, and fund team leader stipends to help us support a strong sense of community within grade levels and the school. We believe this budget will continue to support our students academically as well as socially and emotionally, and help us continue with our work to be a positive and caring community and school. Thank you for this opportunity again. And at this point, I would like to turn over the presentation to Dan Doak, principal of the middle school.
Thank you very much, Patty. And good evening, everyone. It is truly an honor to come to you tonight to speak about Weston Middle School and how this proposed budget really makes some significant improvements to our middle school program. I went to the curriculum committee several times this fall to talk about the importance of the middle school philosophy and this critical stage in our young adolescents' development and their very unique academic, social, emotional needs at this time. So first and foremost, this budget supports a return to the pure teaming model at Weston Middle School, where an interdisciplinary core team of teachers, English, math, science, and social studies, share the same students and really get to know those students well. We are also redesigning the schedule to increase the number of instructional minutes per period, as well as the instructional minutes overall for all of our students, going from an average of 42 minutes per class to 50 minutes per class. We are making a change also in our extended learning time model, replacing quiet study for those students who do not receive either Project Challenge enrichment or interventions or special education supports with an academic workshop. And that way all of our students are getting academic needs met instructional time with teachers. And in that academic workshop, students will be continuing the core work of the academics as they work to increase their skills and knowledge, preparing them to meet our goals as outlined in the Portrait of a Graduate. In addition to all of these improvements, we were also proposing to make world language an everyday class in 6th grade. This budget, as was stated already, continues to fund the important work that our curriculum instructional leaders do as they help to build our teachers' professional capacity through coaching, as well as supporting them in their use of key data analytics to drive instruction and promote student academic growth. The materials that this budget supports for the curriculum include Spanish digital textbook materials, social studies digital materials, science digital resources, and there is a wide variety, as Lisa mentioned earlier, of co-curricular activities, many of them which are tied to our different disciplines, others that are more community service and arts related, and some that just offer opportunities for students to interact socially, which we know is so important at this time and always with this age group. Just to highlight some of those that haven't been mentioned yet, our student government is very active in community service throughout the year. We have a green team that promotes environmental awareness, as well as the hydroponic garden, which also furthers that goal towards sustainability. Math and reading, as Lisa mentioned, are not only the district goals, but also middle school goals as well. So we are maintaining a full-time math interventionist. Part of that is being funded through the Esser grant. We are providing targeted professional development in math. And again, some of the co-curricular activities in the STEM-related areas, Math League and robotics. Reading, we are maintaining 1.5 reading interventionists to ensure that every student reads at grade level. And materials to promote reading include fiction and nonfiction texts for both classroom and our library learning commons. Next slide, please. Thank you. Similar to what Laura and Patty have said, our digital learning and technology needs are being met through this budget, through additional smart displays in the classrooms. There's a variety of software appropriate to the middle school, including things such as the Common Lit formative assessments and Grammarly for language arts, IXL for math, as well as Padlet. And we are also in this budget purchasing a number of additional teacher licenses for that data analytics program Tableau that Laura and Patty spoke of. Special education, this budget helps us to fulfill our responsibilities to our students with IEPs, and as mentioned already, supports the position of a district school psychologist to help meet the needs of testing. Pupil personnel services, this budget maintains our staffing levels of 1 school psychologist, 3 school counselors, and 1 social worker to meet the social emotional needs of our students. And it also promotes continued professional development in social emotional learning, the dialectical behavior therapy that we're using at the secondary level with those service providers. And most importantly, I think to all of this and to the very reason of having a middle school teaming model is that this budget supports the healthy learning environment, a strong sense of community with the grade level teams, supporting the team leader stipends, as well as our student leadership program, the Wingman program, which runs advisory programs throughout the year, promoting a positive school climate. So thank you. And I hope that you'll be able to support this budget as it moves forward. I would like at this time to introduce Julie Gavoni, the interim principal at Weston High School, to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Dan, and good evening, everyone. As my colleagues have done, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight some of what has been included in the high school budget, as well as in the cost centers that support high school programming. So in the area of curriculum and instruction, this budget allows us to program courses that support experiential learning and student choice, and most notably, the new courses that were just approved by the Board of Education this past December. It also allows us to implement new state of Connecticut unfunded mandates, which include the Portrait of the Graduate, which I believe you are all familiar with at this point, as well as a new course in African American and Puerto Rican Latino studies. The budget supports our assuming a 0.2 FTE position as a NEASC coordinator, and that is in preparation for our imminent NEASC self-study and 2025 accreditation visit. NEASC is our accrediting institution, and they send a visiting team to see what we're doing every 10 years. So that is coming up very soon. The budget allows us to maintain the critical support of our curriculum instructional leaders. It allows us to purchase digital textbook licenses and print materials for our foundational Spanish courses. It allows us to supply required materials for our curricula that are very resource heavy, including for 42 sections of science courses and their labs, 36 sections of visual arts courses, as well as in our library learning commons, which provides support to all of our academic areas. In realizing this budget, we continue to fund the dues and fees necessary for students to participate in academic competitions. In various areas, adult memberships or adult dues are needed in order for our students to participate in various competitions and conferences, and examples of those things include the Math League, our Science Olympiad, as well as regionals and all-state for our music program and the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. We seek to continue to maintain our athletic program, which Dr. Cross so nicely highlighted at the beginning of this presentation, which includes 66 teams representing 31 sports. And again, as Dr. Craw mentioned, approximately 70% of Weston High School students participate in athletics, which we are very proud of. We seek to fund 3 new coaching positions to support 4 teams. They're outlined here on the slide, as well as to support stipends for our co-curricular programs, including our amazing theater program company, as well as student government, a myriad of community service organizations, as well as many enrichment activities. At Weston High School, we currently have over 65 active clubs. We're very proud of that. And we want to continue to support our students' interests and passions. In the areas of math and language arts, this budget supports the continued staffing of our math lab for one-on-one and small group support in math, as well as the purchase of new digital textbooks for our Algebra 2 course. As my colleagues have mentioned, the budget supports professional development specifically for math teachers, and that speaks directly to our district and school goals relating to math, and a continued stipend for the Math League. In addition, the budget supports targeted writing support for all students, as well as the implementation of the sophomore writing portfolio through the staffing of our writing center, and the purchase of new textbooks in a variety of English classes. Next slide. Go. The digital learning and technology budget supports An increased number of smart displays in the classrooms. This year, so far, we have been able to install 18 of those displays, and our teachers are really enjoying them. So we are really excited to be able to continue to install those at the high school. In addition, we are seeking to replace all of the iMacs in our art and video labs. That technology is critical to the work that our students are doing in the media arts. And so we want to give them the most up-to-date equipment for that work. In addition, the technology budget supports educational software. And as you well know, particularly in these past 2 years, we've done a lot of learning in this area and have invested a lot in these kinds of resources. So just by way of a few examples at the high school, we have pre-engineering software for our Project Lead the Way program. We have a library database known as Gale in Context Opposing Viewpoints that's accessed by many students. Our science teachers use a collaborative tool known as a visual classroom. And of course, I think many of you are familiar with Naviance, which is used in our school counseling and college and career curriculum. And of course, as my colleagues have previously mentioned, we seek to fund additional licensing for teachers for the data analytics program known as Tableau. The budget for special education and pupil personnel services allows the high school to fulfill our responsibilities to students with individualized education plans. In addition, it helps us support the position of a district school psychologist, again, as my colleagues have mentioned. We are pleased to bring forward a proposal for an increase in the academic staffing for the Alternative Pathways program from what is currently a 0.8 FTE to a 1.6 FTE. And that is to support the diverse academic needs for the growing number of students that are participating in this program. We have seen tremendous success just in the first half of this first year of that program, and we seek to continue that. The budget allows us to maintain current counseling staff to meet the social emotional needs of our students and to provide targeted academic support for regular education students through our Center for Academic Support and Enhancement and Structured Study program. Finally, the SPED and PPS budget provides continued professional development in dialectical behavioral therapy to support students' social emotional skills, both through the health curriculum and through our counseling services. In terms of healthy learning environment, our budget request supports a strong sense of community within Weston High School through our advisory programming, support for our PBIS coach, as well as our student government and class advisor stipends. I thank you for your time. And with that, I turn the presentation over to Mr. Gross.
Thank you, Julie. Good evening, everyone. So tonight, as you've heard, we've heard of the many areas that this budget will support. Right now, I just want to give a quick overview as to pretty much what is driving our budget. We're seeing our main drivers are enrollment, staffing, salaries and benefits, and special education. Next slide, please. So as Lisa had mentioned, our current budget, our requested budget for the FY23 represents a 1.9 million increase or a 3.48% overall increase. But it's important that we truly understand or take some time to understand what caused this increase. As Lisa previously mentioned, one of a significant factor that's driving the increase this year is a change in the funding source for our dental claims. In previous years, we have been able to pay for the dental claims from our internal services fund. This year, we are making a decision to shift the claims and pay those claims from our operating budget. That will account for roughly a 0.79% increase. In addition to that, as we focus on health insurance, we do anticipate our budget assumes a 6.5% increase in our increase for the state partnership plan. Typically, we will not see a true rate increase until sometime in the early spring. When you combine our health insurance, the dental and our health insurance, that represent approximately a 1.3% increase to our overall budget, which is quite significant. Other areas of increase that we will see has to do with our support partners. And when I mention our support partners, I mean our transportation drivers, our transportation company. I also refer to our cleaning company and also the various professional services that our district relies on to help to support our needs. Also included in that is a support for our special needs students. As we dive into the budget in more detail, we'll definitely spend some time and focus on all these various areas. I just want to highlight that where possible, we have used grant funds to mitigate several categories. We're using grant funds to mitigate salaries, professional services, transportation, and tuition. And as Lisa mentioned, if it wasn't for these funds, our budget would be significantly more than what it currently is today. As we review the budget in greater details in the upcoming days and we focus a lot more on salaries, you will notice that there were several reductions and several changes that we have made in our overall salary accounts, which has resulted in a really modest increase in our year-over-year budget for salary of $60,000. Equipment purchases, we continue to support our multi-year plan for equipment replacement. The plan for this year is to lease. And as we, again, over the next couple of days, we will definitely spend some more time to go in greater details with all these various line items. Next slide, please. So graphically, as I said, based in education, the majority of our budget is driven by salaries and benefits. And as you look in the pie here, you'll see that salaries and benefits do take the largest portion of this pie. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Phil. Next slide. I'd like to take a moment to talk about enrollment projections. The enrollment projections determine the number of certified and support staff required to meet our students' needs, which in turn impacts salaries and benefits. It's still unknown how the pandemic and its consequences will affect our schools. But in order to ensure that the projections were as accurate as possible, the district commissioned 2 different consultants to conduct enrollment studies. The New England School Development Council and SLAM both presented to the Board of Education their findings in November of 2021, and the full reports are located in the district budget document. The reports confirmed projected fluctuations and decreases across certain grade levels in schools. It also included future projections as well as a 10-year future projection analysis. And this work will be especially important to the town's Facilities Optimization Committee. Our challenge for our budget is in developing the budget to utilize the projections as well as class size guidelines to determine our staffing needs. The Board of Ed class guidelines, as Patty and Laura stated, are kindergarten and first grade between 18 and 20, and grades 2 through 12 between 20 and 24. You will notice on this comparison chart that the greatest difference in the projections is kindergarten. Not really a surprise. The discrepancy is 16 students, which is the difference of 1 section. In this budget, we have used the SLAM kindergarten projections, which are 7 sections of 130 students for an average class size of 19. With kindergarten enrollment a continual challenge, we are requesting the 7 sections with the understanding that we will reduce that number if warranted by a decline in enrollment. And I know Ms. Cadis is sending out her letter shortly, if it hasn't gone out already, about kindergarten registration. The difference in projections in grades 1 through 8 are minimal. However, both studies confirm there is a decrease in 5th grade, warranting a reduction of 1 section. And at the high school, the difference between the two is 9 students. Next slide, please. This table illustrates actual enrollment as of October 2021 as compared to SLAM's projected enrollment for next year. You will notice an increase of 23 students for grade 3 next year. We are not looking at this point to increase the number of sections. However, it is important that we are keeping a very close eye on this number as it is approaching board guidelines. You can see clearly here the decrease in 5th grade, which will be reduced by 1 section. At the high school, our senior class is decreasing by 23 students. High school enrollment is always very challenging to predict because of the number of multi-grade courses across the different grade levels. An example of this is math, where an incoming freshman could be enrolled in 6 different courses. So the staffing at the high school is really dependent on student requests that happen in the early spring, and courses with an enrollment under 10 students are looked at very carefully through the lens of academic return on investment. Next slide, please. This speaks to the staffing reallocations and reductions. This staffing budget is all about looking at the positions, looking at the needs, and figuring out how can we maximize our staffing? How can we reallocate and reduce where appropriate without hurting our academic program? At Hurlbut Elementary School, Laura spoke about the increase for the lunchroom and playground monitors, which does speak to safety and security. Patty spoke about the Weston Intermediate School with the decrease in the grade 5 section. Weston Middle School, there is a decrease of a 1.6 FTE total, and that is after a careful reallocation of our FTEs and strengthening the academic grade level teams. And then at Weston High School, we have a decrease of a 2.0 FTE, again, enrollment and reallocations. And it should be noted when Julie spoke about the increase in staffing for the academic pathways, that's a reallocation. That funding, however, is in the cost center of special ed and pupil personnel services. It's the same staff that would be delivering the service at the high school. Next slide, please. Hello, thank you. Staffing organization. Throughout the document, there are spreadsheets with staffing broken down with accompanying descriptions. And in my introduction, what I strove to do was to group the staffing into 4 different categories to better facilitate an understanding of the human capital component of this budget, which is almost 70% of the budget. The administration includes central office as well as the school administration, the administration specifically related to PPS as well. Teachers and instructional paraprofessionals, when we look at that group, it includes all regular ed teachers, library aides, instructional paras, not sped paras, but the instructional paras, like the science para at the elementary schools or the math or the language arts paras. It also includes instructional stipends and co-curricular stipends that we have. Of special note in this category are the curriculum instructional leaders. The curriculum instructional leaders, as several of my colleagues have highlighted, are critical instructional coaches. They work across our K-12 program, supporting teachers in the classroom. This year, we have a big initiative to do classroom walkthroughs, looking at it through the lens of student engagement, specifically in the area of math, but then expanding across the other disciplines. These instructional coaches support that, working hand in hand with the teachers to improve the instruction for learning right in the classroom. Our special education staff includes teachers, counselors, social workers. We have speech pathologists. We have the behavioral analysts, the bus aides, the extended year staff, the summer school. homebound tutors, our paraprofessionals, and also SPED and PPS stipends. It also includes additional secretarial support for our new IEP data system. This is another unfunded mandate. We have to switch to this system, which is rather complicated, and Tracy will be speaking about that shortly. And then the support staff. When I look at our support staff, they are the ones who day in and day out keep this district running to support teaching and learning. Our nursing supervisor and 4 nurses. We are very fortunate to have a nurse in every building as well as a nursing supervisor, especially given the demands of COVID. Our central office support staff, the payroll, the finance, our school secretaries, the custodians, our security specialists, our director of facilities, director of technology, the technicians, the substitutes. And when you look at the substitutes, there are different categories. There's the substitutes that are daily substitutes. There are building substitutes. And then we also have a category of long-term substitutes. For example, we have several leaves going on right now, medical leaves, and that's where we fund those substitutes. And we strive to provide the best possible teacher in those circumstances that extend over long periods of time. Next slide, please. I'd like to turn this back over to Phil, who is going to delve a little bit deeper into the salaries, the benefits, and the health insurance. Phil?
Here we go. So as I mentioned, our increase total salaries for FY23 is approximately $33,686,000, which really is a modest 0.11%, 0.11% increase, or roughly $60,911. Our staffing request reflects contractual obligation to the 3 unions, as well as a reallocation and reduction of staff to best meet the district goals and missions. In this 3rd and final year of the union contract, the contractual obligation are as follows. For the WTA, there is a general wage increase of a 0.75 plus a step. For those individuals who are at the top step, they will have a GWR, or general wage increase, of a 1.7%. For our ASME group, the increase will be a 2% plus step, 2% GWI plus step. For law, there'll be a general wage increase of 2.25%. In addition, salary increases for employees unaffiliated with a union typically mirror parallel bargaining units. District-wide admin will represent a 2.5% GWI, and our support staff will represent a 2.2% GWI. Benefits. The increase in benefits without including dental claim is $548,754, representing a 1% increase to our budget. The cost of funded dental, as I mentioned previously, is a 0.79%. The total cost for our benefits is $10,988,904. This increase in benefits is based primarily on the following: the move to fund dental claims from the operating budget, the anticipated 6.5% increase for health insurance from the state, and the district's contribution to municipal employees' retirement services. As noted above, $434,330 has been included to fund the dental claims within the district's operating budget. Dental claims are administered by Dental. The town's internal services fund has a balance of approximately $389,000, which protects the town serving as a reserve if and when the town should decide to return to a self-insured model. The cost of the state partnership plan has increased as an anticipated increase of a 6.5%. The plan covers both our active and our retired employees. Next slide, please. Or is this the same slide? Continue on health insurance. The district's benefit cost is mitigated by the cost to the employees. The three unions are the Western Teachers Association, WTA, the American Federation of State, County Municipal Employees, ASME, and the Western Administrators Association, WA. Their percentage shares of premium costs are as follows: WTA at 18.5%, ASME at 13.5%, and WA at 20%. In addition, there's a small group of unaffiliated employees, including central office support services and administration, included in the state partnership plan. Their contribution aligned with parallel bargaining groups. The net increase to the district for this insurance is $315,000. All three of these contracts end in June of 2023. Any changes to the health insurance will be discussed in upcoming negotiation with each bargaining group. The district's portion of for CMERS, the Municipal Employee Retirement System, is based on a contribution of 17.9%. The district does not make any contributions to the teachers' retirement. That is all paid by the teachers. They're also included in our benefits is a final payment for our EREP, which was approved last fiscal year. And as usual, benefits also includes the payroll taxes and all the other costs associated with services provided to each of our employees. And I think with this, I am also going to now turn it over to Tracy.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Good evening, everybody. I know Dan is switching the slide. Before we officially start with this slide, I do just want to make the same statement that I made last year. So for those of you who are on the board last year, this will sound familiar. For those of you who are new, I just think it's important for all of us to be on the same page. I think there's two key principles when we're talking about the SPED and PPS budget, and that is complexity and confidentiality. And I mention this each year because I think it's important. Unlike other aspects of the budget, these two areas are largely driven by individual student needs, which creates complexity from a planning perspective. Additionally, and especially given the size of our community, we also need to be mindful of confidentiality for our students as we discuss specific lines in the budget tonight, and then definitely moving forward as we get into more specific conversations about individual lines. Last year, we talked a lot about maintaining staff, programs, and services, and that is still absolutely a priority. We're also looking this year to maintain and expand alternative pathways, which you'll remember was a brand new budget proposal last year. This is year one of the program. And as Julie alluded to earlier, we have seen a lot of success with that and want to expand on that moving forward. For the purpose of the slide tonight, and with that context, I want to highlight the budget drivers for special education and PPS this year, many of which have been captured in the building level and district level updates earlier in the presentation. In previous meetings this year, the curriculum committee and the finance committee, I've talked about the challenges of the pandemic. We are still actively working through the academic and the social emotional challenges that students are facing at all levels. The pandemic is by no means over, and we're seeing continued impacts that it's having on our students. And those impacts are driving a lot of the budget drivers, especially within special education for the proposed budget. What I want to do on this slide is kind of bring together all of the building level changes that you've heard about and provide the rationale for why we're making those adjustments. I do think Julie spoke to the increase in academic support at the high school level through the Alternative Pathways program. We have seen a lot of success in that model. We've also seen some opportunities to expand it in very unique and specific ways. and also meet the needs of more students than we can meet right now. We were very transparent with the board and the community last year that this program, especially in year one, had a capacity, meaning we would only be able to support a certain number of students. And we're seeing an opportunity to work beyond that capacity moving forward. We also need to be thinking about our mental health supports district-wide. So each of the buildings referenced a position that we're calling a district-wide psychologist. That will be one person. They will not be allocated to a specific building for a certain amount of time. It will all be based on need. Because what we see, for whatever reason, are trends throughout the school year where one building might have a high need for a number of evaluations in a certain month, and maybe other buildings don't have that same level of need. We want to be able to focus our attention for that person in the areas that need it the most in the moment. We also, and Laura spoke to this in her presentation for Hess, we are looking to reframe the model that's in place for mental health support for our youngest learners. We have previously had 2 psychologists in that building. We are looking to replace one of those positions with a social worker position, which will allow us to provide some clinical support that comes with social worker training that is unique to that specific position and is not often captured in a psychologist position. And then you'll probably remember that this year through our grant, we have had mental health consultation about providing mental health supports to our students for all of our staff K-12. We are going to be continuing that next year as well. Lisa just alluded to the rollout of the new IEP. This is happening statewide. It is effective July 1st, 2022. We are just beginning training for specific staff members this month who will ultimately help roll this information out to the staff as a whole. It is incredibly complex from a paperwork and technical standpoint because everything that is housed in our current system called IEP Direct, which we've had for over a decade in district, has to literally be taken out of that system, document by document, in order to be preserved and then ultimately re-uploaded to this new system. Additionally, our staff have been working so hard to support students, and I'd like to be able to shift some of their attention away from paperwork over the next year. This is also a grant-funded position with the goal that within this new statewide program, I'm anticipating a reduction in paperwork moving forward. Parents will actually have access to this system directly, so we won't need to be sending them documents in the way that we are now. So that's why this is being funded through the grant. And then finally, Lisa had alluded to this earlier, and I've shared this in previous meetings, and I think we anticipated this last year. We are seeing an increase in the complexity of the needs of our students. And we do everything that we can to support our students in district. And there are situations where students require more intensive supports and services than we are able to provide in Weston. And I will just say that those are complex and challenging and emotional discussions for school staff, for families, but that's certainly reflected in the budget this year as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Phil, who is going to be talking, I think, about operational costs.
Actually, it's me.
Lisa.
I'll let you off the hook, Phil. Also in the introduction, in the budget document, I put together sort of consolidated some operational costs to kind of give you an overall perspective of what it costs to run the district. If you look at transportation, you look at the cleaning services, the trash removal, and the utilities, right there, that's almost $4 million. $4 million of the almost 57 million that we need. Technology infrastructure, the support of our network, that's another 200,000. We have equipment repairs at 310,000. Special education contracted services, this is supplemented. We have that estimated at about 385,000. And then we have legal costs. We do not have a counsel anymore on staff. And so we rely on our legal counsel to help us with matters specifically pertaining to policy, to education, to grievance arbitration. We have 3 union contracts that have to be negotiated this year, FOIA, as well as in special education mediation cases, things of that nature. This whole list right here, you're looking at 5,200,000. That's just operational costs to run the districts. Next slide, please. I should add that Dan DeVito is not sleeping at the switch. He has texted me profusely to say that his internet service is spotty. Okay, Director of Technology, and he's very frustrated. So he's with us. It's just he's catching up. The technology is catching up. Thanks, Dan. And now the capital budget. Although the capital budget doesn't affect the operational budget, there is a 4-year capital budget plan in this budget document. Here is the year 1 of the plan, and you can list the 14 different items. I think it's worth pointing out that while some of them are very specifically related to the facilities, the air handling, and the duct work and things like that, remember our community shares these facilities like the tennis court repairs, or when we look at the paving, we look at things that have to do with the bathroom renovations, the air conditioning in the weight room and the dance studio. This is all used at different times by the public as well. Remember, the high school is the comfort center for the district, the track. All of this in the capital budget proposal for facilities is $1,052,956,000. Next slide, please. We're almost in the home stretch here. And I wanted to go back to look again at this pie chart. And I want, when you look at this pie chart and you see that 77% of our budget is in salaries and benefits. That's a huge cost. There are contractual obligations, the number of staff that we have to provide teaching and learning and all the support services for our students. So when I look at this, though, I want you to go beyond that 77%, beyond that 34 million, whatever plus, and think back to the very beginning when I talked about the personalization that our students receive in Weston because of the size of our district and the connection with the students and the staff. Next slide, please. That's really what sets the Weston schools apart. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I'd like to, as you think about that 77%, think about the journey that our students make beginning in Hurlbut Elementary School. At Hurlbut Elementary School, every child is welcomed by the security guard, Mr. Fisher, who greets our children and makes sure they are safe in that drop-off loop. They go to the library where Miss Rodko instills a love of learning, a passion for books that is so critical at that age. Next slide, please. When they get to Hurlbut from WIS and they arrive at WIS Elementary School, in a moment, thank you, WIS Pride. You know, and I look at this slide, I think of our paraprofessional, Mrs. Getz, who painstakingly clips and cuts and organizes every possible science manipulative and supply to provide our students at the West and also at Hurlbut for engaging inquiry projects in science that just build upon their curiosity and love of science all the way through the schools up to the high school. I think about Mr. Paul, who is socially distancing there in the lobby, or you can see Miss Soboleski outside teaching her clarinet, Mr. Paul their instruments, the choir director teaching them singing outside, the passion for music that those WIS students embrace. Next slide, please. And then the middle school. And when we go to the middle school, I am amazed when I'm there early in the morning to see the morning show that librarian Helen Knudsen, who's a Weston resident, the kids went through the school. She's dedicated her life to working with our Weston students and preparing them for this morning show. There we see one of our 8th graders who was so excited about working the camera. Take my picture, Mrs. Wolak. And I look at that, and then I think where they end up with Mr. Brencher at the high school and in the videography program. Or I look at the art students and doing the blocking in the 8th grade art classes, and where they go with Gina Arena's program in the hands-on with the visual arts and crafts. I also think about Mrs. Welsh and Mr. Ross Valley in 8th grade when I visited their classes. And I was so impressed with the way they were integrating physics into 8th grade science. We have one of the strongest physics programs at that high school. And it's because of those seeds that are sown early on in this K-12 journey. Next slide, please. And finally, of course, the high school, which has a special fondness in my heart because I spent most of my time there. And I love looking at that picture, and that epitomizes the portrait of a graduate, the joy of our graduates celebrating on Stadium Field, knowing they are well prepared for their preferred futures because they took courses like the sustainability course with Mr. Aikenhead, and they developed a passion and an interest and turned that into something concrete. When we go to the waste station or the trash station over at Weston, they helped build those containers that are being used for the bottles and cans. I think about Mr. Carboni, who takes such pride in our fields and grounds, and every morning is out there. And I my heart really fills with joy when the kids cross the street and you hear the 11th and 12th graders, "Thank you, Mr. Carboni. Good morning, Mr. Carboni." We are raising amazing, amazing young men and women. And then, of course, our cafeteria staff, K-12, under the direction of Andre Santelli, who has really rise to the occasion in very difficult times with COVID to prepare delicious food. The high school breakfasts are a special highlight that I like. These are the people of the Weston Public Schools. This is the 77% of the budget. This is the personalization, the connection that we definitely know, especially after COVID, that is so critical for our students to be able to have in Weston and what the community expects. You know, we've talked about what we need, $57 million. We've talked about how we will spend it. Now it's time to talk about the why. That's the most important thing. What is the why behind this request? Why do we get up every morning, this staff, and come here to the Weston Public Schools? And the why is simple, because we are committed. We are committed every day to excellence, to continued and purposeful innovation. This is our vision, and we must pursue it vigorously. And I thank you for your attention. We're done. Dan, you may stop the slide presentation, and I'm sure you're happy about that.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, and the entire administration and staff for putting this together. It it's great before we go through the 259 pages in the budget book. By the way, everyone watching from home, if you go to the website under the budget icon, you can also review the 259 pages of details. But this was an excellent way of actually bringing those numbers to life and illustrating the breadth, the scale, the complexity of the educational institution that we are so proud of here in Weston. Thank you for that. I have one comment before I open it up for question, and that has to do with the $400 and some odd thousand of dental insurance that were flowing through the operating budget. And I don't want to take too much time with this, but several years ago, we went from a self-funded medical insurance to the state plan. As part of having a self-funded medical insurance, we needed to have a buffer in the internal services fund. And that buffer was there until a few years ago, when we actually didn't need it anymore to actually to provide that buffer. And so year after year, we reduced the internal services fund by the amount of dental insurance premium. And we were just going to run it down, because the thought was that we were never going to go back to a self-funded plan. And in fact, if and when we do change the healthcare plan, the medical plan will probably go to another private plan. Year after year, the Board of Finance criticized that. And my argument was, we've already taxed the taxpayer for that buffer. Why tax them again in the operating budget, right? And so this year, we thought we'd reverse it. We'd put it through the operating budget, discuss it with the rest of the board during January, and then finally discuss it with the Board of Finance. And if they decide that we want to run down the entire internal services fund and not run it through the operating budget, we'll do that. If they Board of Finance decides that they want to keep that buffer in the internal services fund, we'll do that as well. But instead of removing it now, we thought we'd just keep it in there for now and then discuss what we want to do with that during our deliberations, and then ultimately with the Board of Finance. That was comment. I have a bunch of questions, but I want to open it up to the rest of the board right now for questions.
I can start, Tony.
Yeah.
First, thank you so much, Lisa and everyone, for this, as Tony said, bringing life to it. It's just so nice to, no offense, Phil, but it's so nice to see more than just the numbers. It's so important that those numbers tell a story, and you've all really animated it in a way that A, shows how committed we are as a district, and B, how much Lisa knows this district inside and out as superintendent, and thank you. I just have one question, and then I'll defer to everyone else. And it's around the Esser fund grant, the Esser funds. I know we're in year 2, I think, of 3 years of this, and I just want to hear some reassurance, which I'm sure you have well in hand, that as we know, grant funds go away. And so you don't want to, staff up in a way that that isn't sustainable. Are the hires you're making sort of short-term by design, because those ESSER grants will go away? And are they, I know they're in direct response to the challenges that have been presented to us because of COVID, professional development in particular areas that have suffered, like math, and the school psychologist, to really ramp up our support for the social emotional piece. But because we know those monies are going away, are we pretty confident that those positions can also go away, or do they have to live in perpetuity?
Thank you, Taffy, for asking that question. I welcome the opportunity to clarify. And Dr. Craw and Phil might want to jump in at some point, but I'll start. You make it an excellent point. You know, this money was really a gift, an opportunity to address some needs that of learning loss. But from the very beginning, when we saw the funding, we outlined, you know, are the 3 years. What happens year 4? What happens year 5? Looking at enrollment projections, figuring it out. So, for example, this year, like Laura explained, it was very important to us to put in a curriculum instructional leader in math at Hurlbut. I'll give you the why. So we have a curriculum instructional leader that is in charge of 612 secondary. That person probably works with, I don't know, Julie and Dan, how many, maybe 18, 20 people, if you're pushing it with, you know, the SPED, direct math, things like that. So 20 people. We had, before we used the Esser funds this year, we had Carolyn Vinton, who was a curricular instructional leader for math and science across 2 buildings. If you have, what is it, roughly 20 plus sections of students in the Hurlbut and WIS, plus you have special ed teachers that are providing math. You're asking this person to provide instructional coaching and to work with 50 people between 2 buildings. There is no way that that could have happened effectively. So whether it was COVID, the effects of COVID, whatever, we needed an instructional leader specifically for math at Hurlbut. And we put the position in for this first year and part of the Esser funding. Now, for this coming budget proposal, we put that position in the operating budget because this is a position that we will continue to need. And we leveraged it against the interventionist full-time equivalency staffing that we had, with the expectation that with our different federal funding and our operational budget and targeting math at the level we are, with coaching, with the professional development, with the interventions with the students, that we would be able to reduce math intervention over time.
Perfect.
And then we would be able to fund the coach, which we desperately need at that level, but the interventions will go away. There is an expectation. And that is through, you know, through our funding, through our professional development, also through our evaluation and supervision plan, where we have set targets that we want to see, and we want to see the evidence indicators of how we can move these children forward. You know, when you measure something and you really focus with like a laser on it, you will see the growth. And I am confident that this staff will be able to do that.
That's right. Yeah, the why is not in question at all. It's more the preparedness for when it disappears, and the foresight to wean yourself off of those funds, as opposed to assuming that we can replace them with something else. And maybe we do replace them if it becomes a critical, you know, FTE. But that's just what I'm guessing you were top of mind, and it sounds like you are.
Yeah. And, you know, one thing I like about the budgeting process around the grants, the rounds of grants that are not permanent grants, is that we've highlighted the resources that we're putting against those grants. So it's very transparent in the staffing section, so that each year we can actually see the movements.
Can I ask I have a related question to Taffy's, and actually I'm glad you asked about the grant, because I had that very question written down. The grants aren't guaranteed. Am I correct to say, I know that Connecticut has this weird law about the minimum budget requirement year over year. So am I correct to say that because grant money is being used for some of these positions, it does not put the district on the hook? Essentially, it has, in some ways, a zero, but it doesn't increase our budget. Or does it increase our budget? It doesn't increase our budget, so that next year or in a future year, because of the minimum the minimum budget requirement, if these grants go away and we can no longer fund them, we're not putting ourselves in a bad position, right? These because it's being paid with grant money, it does not. The question is, does it affect the minimum budget requirement in future years that we increase?
Mr. Cross?
Yeah, that's a great question, David.
Yeah, it is. But to clarify, the minimum budget requirement is based only on the operating budget. It does not take into account any grant expenditures.
Okay, so that's actually a really clarifying answer then. So the minimum budget requirement only is on operational costs.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's actually an important clarification, because I think people see wow, we had $1 million too. That's added into the budget. No, that's not counted as part of that. Thank you, Phil.
Lisa,
Yeah.
I wanted to just hop in here and say thank you. I know this took a lot of time for you and your staff to put together, so you did a great job. And I want to reiterate what both Tony and Taffy said, which was you really kind of brought, and I think it's only because you know the system so well, you actually brought the personalization to this presentation that really kind of helps us to, you give us the warm and fuzzies. Nice job. That's hard to do.
Here. Team effort.
It's hard to do around a whole lot of numbers too, but you did a really great job of bringing it down to a very personal level. I do have some questions though, and one of them has to do with the school psychologist. Each of the principals mentioned, having a school psychologist, but the reality is it's a district psychologist. So and I just want to get clarification on that, right? We have one district-wide psychologist who's responsible for all 4 of the schools, correct?
I'll ask Tracy to speak to it, but just really quick, and then I'll stop. There's a psychologist in every building.
Okay.
On top of that, we will also have for next year a district psychologist. Tracy, if you can add to that, please.
Sure. So to clarify, yes, we are talking about one position. It will impact all 4 schools. And as Lisa said, there is already an existing psychologist in each of the buildings. The very specific purpose of this position is to address the very significant increase in evaluations that we've seen, particularly this school year. And I would also say, we started to see elements of this last school year. And I think I can also answer the question about grant funding in conjunction with this position too. Yes, we are using grant funding to cover this particular position. I have to obviously closely monitor this, but we want to see what our trends look like in terms of referrals and evaluations as we hopefully move to a little bit more stability next year and beyond. But I'll be looking at that carefully as we move forward.
Excellent. As a follow-up question too, I know, Lisa, you mentioned specifically that in Hurlbut, we're having a math interventionist that's going to be starting, which I think is great. But when we take a look at the allocation of the interventionist in WIS and the middle school in particular, we're still seeing that the reading interventionists, there's more of a demand for that, or there's more of a staffing for that. Considering, it's a tough one, right? We want to make sure that all of the students' needs are met, but considering the fact that our most recent tests show the weakness tends to be in mathematics, is that the ratio that we're looking for?
We talked long and hard on that, Sharon. Mathematics is definitely an area that merits our attention. We also, however, discovered that there are concerns in reading, especially in the early years of the middle school. If it's an effect from COVID, it's very hard to determine, but we know that it exists. So we carefully looked at it. And if you look at, for example, when you look at the intervention allocations at the middle school, more of that is also covered by Esser, because our hope is that it will go away. And I think Mr. Doak is shaking his head yes. I can't tell. I don't know if you want to add something, Mr. Doak, to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well, but I think also what we're looking at for math, in addition to the math intervention specialists, is a major focus. We're doing a lot of training in math. We're looking at some of what we call the tier 1 interventions, which is the regular education classroom, and looking at meeting the needs and helping students progress through that. In addition, we're not just relying on the math interventionist to help us there.
Dr. Crow, I don't know if you wish to contribute anything because you were involved in all of those discussions and those allocations as well, because we really were looking very carefully at it to see what the best, as I said, the best academic return on investment. Dr. Crow?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. If you look in the budget document, you'll see that, our previous allocations of part-time math interventionists were augmented by the Esser funds to make those existing positions at Hurlbut and Wyss full-time. And I think that's clear in the budget, shows you exactly how much we've added. That's been commensurate with the need we have with students and, distributing that extra resource to the groups of students that need the tier 2 and tier 3 support. And so if you look at the middle school, we're also, we've even already backed off a little bit on that 1.0 and covered it 0.4 through the Esser. So, I think that one of the things that, when Taffy brought this up, I was thinking, we did not actually make any new hires for this additional support. We took existing part-time position, people who knew the system and the kids well, and increased their positions full-time with Esser. We see opportunity for down the road, and we've looked out to the next year and the year after that for potential consolidation of those positions as we pull back on that Esser. But we think the funding, as Sharon, you've mentioned, is right at this point for math. With reading, it's certainly the foundation for everything, and we have historically had more need and support in reading, but we did slightly increase that at the middle school through Esser.
Okay. I have one final question, and then I'm going to let others jump in here and ask their questions. And that is, clearly because of the Esser funds, we've been able to add in support that we've needed. And without them, the actual increase in the budget is minimal. So with that being said, when there are things being added in, yes, there's funds to cover it, et cetera, have we had to cut anything this year? Lisa?
For this proposal.
For this proposal, have we had to cut anything for this proposal?
I would say that there is always a list of things that I would like to put in the budget. I can defer my answer a little bit. I think that we were very careful to really try to study every single position. I can't underestimate, if you will, the need in the area of pupil personnel services and special education for the social emotional support. I think that has been extremely challenging and taxing on our staff. If I had the ability to say I wanted to hire 4 more positions in that area in a variety of capacities, I would certainly consider that. But as I said, it's a balance between what we can do to remain fiscally responsible and how we can maximize all of our grant funding and our operating costs. I also think that, sometimes just it's not always about the money. It's also about how we, and I think we're a very reflective team, how we can keep reflecting and revising protocols and systems to get the most out of what we have. And it's been really challenging to do that this year and to get a sense of that, quite frankly, because of COVID and its impact, especially in the area, for example, of staff attendance. When we lose key staff members for 5 days, for 10 days, for different, close contact exposures, things like that. There are certain areas where it really becomes stretched. So it's challenging. Do you think about putting that in, hoping that we can, with systems and getting through this pandemic, things will get better with the psychologists, the evaluations, the testing, that increase? I certainly hope so. I learned a long time ago, someone told me hope isn't a strategy. I think some of us remember who used to say that. And so we're trying to be very planful with that. But of course, there's always more that I would love to be able to give the students a question. It's just making those choices. And I do appreciate the upcoming workshops and the discussions so that, any good ideas are always welcome in this area.
I'm not suggesting necessarily that we take things away from the students by any stretch of the imagination. I was just curious if you had to sacrifice.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think if I asked every administrator right here, everybody could come up with 2 things that they wish that they had in their school budget.
Absolutely.
Or in their program center. I'm sure Mark Berkowitz is nodding. He said he's been trying to get these assistant coaches. I said, put them in. One of them is shared between the girls and the boys. Everything is really so important, and there's consequences for not having certain things.
Yeah. Sharon, I think this is a good topic for tomorrow's workshop because, it does, when you look at the numbers, right? And I think this is where we have to discuss it. It does look like budget to budget, there is headcount reduction, but when you add the grant FTEs, right, there's an headcount increase. And then the question is, it goes back to the question that David had, is really kind of tracking the headcount through the funding cycle and seeing what remains or not. But I think that's definitely a big topic of conversation tomorrow, because we have the staffing numbers, they're out, you can see clearly where they're allocated. And I think a good discussion around what that steady state might look like, even though we don't really know it 2 years out, it's worth the discussion of where we think it's going to go, right?
Right.
And perhaps an argument for a multi-year budget look forward.
It's in there. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
No, Tavi, I was having that exact thought just a second ago. First, thank you for this presentation. It was really helpful, and I think it it really personalized the budget book in a way that hasn't been done in recent memory. So I think it was a very, very effective presentation. I do, in looking through the binder and listening to the presentation, I do wish there was a little bit more progress on the multi-year budgeting. I think particularly with respect to, I know, Dan, with the technology budget, we've gone over the technology leasing and the 6-year plan and where things are coming in and out. If it's possible, could we circulate that as part of this for either the workshop tomorrow or next week? It would help me kind of put all the pieces together. I also think it would help, with respect to a lot of the questions that the board members are having with respect to the Esser funds versus the operating budget. If we could see it in a multi-year format, I think it would be easier to understand where and how some of these costs are being addressed in future years.
Yeah.
Also, I'm sorry. Did somebody say something?
No, go ahead.
Melissa, just so you know, the 6-year plan for technology is included in the budget. It's in the
great. Where is it?
It's in the equipment section, closer to the back of the book.
Okay. All right. In which section, Phil?
Equipment.
Okay. Perfect.
7,300.
All right. That's great. I'll take a look at that. My apologies. I've been sick. Also, with respect to sustainability, I didn't see a line item for sustainability. Do we have that yet? And I think this one would be particularly helpful in multi-year budgeting because it's, first of all, it's one of our district goals. Second of all, I think it's something where we could see, it would be very useful for projections because not only can we track costs associated with sustainability initiatives, but also hopefully eventually we could track savings and investments and tie the two together. So I think it would be nice to add sustainability to the budget.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? I'll just ask. I don't understand that. Are we talking about, I guess, because I'm looking at it through the educator lens of the courses and the green clubs. Are you talking specifically about like, solar panels? What are you looking for? Like, I know that I've spoken with Sam Nestor, how there are certain grants that she's looking for with the town. And I wanted to jump on the electric, car chargers, because I promised Mike Aikenhead when he came here, I would get him one. What could you be a little bit more specific so I can get what you need? Because I don't know. I don't
And
understand.
Melissa, it might be a question of creating a new object.
Like a topic, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
What are we? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we talked about it a little bit last budget cycle, about, and maybe Taffy's right, it would be better as a subject matter area so that we could pull across district. But I think, what are the costs associated with any of our initiatives? Are we planting things? Are we investing in electric, charging stations, things that we've discussed, maybe now or down the road? And then are there savings associated with any of these things that we invest in year 2, 3, 4, 5, just something that we can track going forward. I think anything that we, Lisa, anything that we worked through with the sustainability policy, we had I think there were 11 bulleted items that we were working toward,
Right.
all of that, we could.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay,
No,
I can go back and look at the policy to sort of refresh my recollection.
And Lisa, this is sort of one of those things where, it's not a make work project. It's more like an aggregating all of the numbers that relate to our sustainable and environmental stewardship policy at the school and putting them in a very tiny section. I'm sure Phil could probably pull those numbers if each, administrator submitted them, and looking at it in terms of, and this isn't really a where can we cut? It's actually the opposite. Wouldn't you say, Melissa? It's
Yes.
Where are we allocating funds so that we ensure that we're, rolling out this policy in a way that's meaningful.
So for example, things like what I talked about with like rubbish removal and the
Yes.
cleaning products. Okay, so that would really be
Yes.
out of operations and facilities as opposed to building administrators. That's the educational piece, but we can do that.
I mean, it may also, if you can scrape up what, and that's kind of hard to do, right? How many FTEs are spending time working on that particular thing? That's harder to do, but we recognize that the sustainability policy isn't just about how we're recycling or how we're, thinking about solar panels, but also how we're educating to that end. So that's a harder number to grasp. I recognize. Is that what you're getting at, Melissa?
Well, actually, I think the educational piece is an easier number to grasp.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
Well, just because I don't think that I do not know of any major initiatives that we're doing now. So we would have to certainly start exploring them. Hopefully, perhaps in partnership with the town and with the grants that they said that they were working on. Okay, I understand.
And I think
this isn't new money. This isn't new money. That's what, okay, go ahead, Melissa, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say it's just a working goal to kind of have this information compiled in one place where we can always point to it and look to it and learn from it. If it's a placeholder for now, if it's a small piece of information for now, and it's a growth area that each year we can add to. It's, I certainly don't want to put any more work on anybody right now in light of, everything we've going on. I don't think that we have unreasonable sustainability costs or anything. It's just more, this is an opportunity for us to learn and grow. So let's start planning for it.
I understand now. Thank you for that clarification.
And-
Just one other thing I wanted to go back to really quickly, and that's about with the Esser funding and, the multi-year. So this is our second year. We have our allocation for the final year. So it's running out, I guess I would say. And part of what we're doing also, I mean, we can certainly project, but it's based on the data analytics of the student performance. So we will give our best, try there. But we already changed the allocation, for example, for next year based on the performance. And, we have 2 more tests that we need to look at, quite frankly, assessments to see how we're doing in those areas.
Now,
Go ahead, Tony.
we do have page 34 in the budget book has the multi-year budget, but one of the things that we probably have to do in the workshop is understand to what extent any of that roll off is baked in or not. I mean, so we should probably go through that tomorrow at some point, or when we get to that in the budget. Okay.
Yeah, I had one other question while I have the floor a little bit. And that was, throughout all the building level presentations, we saw obviously one of our major district goals is everybody spoke to math and reading. And so there were a lot of mention of interventionists, maintaining and or hiring interventionists. So I was just wondering if somebody can speak to the process of and role of an interventionist. And I'm just wondering if we're hiring, multiple or maintaining multiple interventionists across buildings, and if it was considered at some point, is it more cost effective to hire a teacher or to consider other options for staffing? I'm not exactly sure what an interventionist is compared to a teacher, and I was just wondering if someone could speak to that.
Sure, I would defer to, why don't we start with Laura and then Patty, because they see it every day in the classrooms. And if Ken has something to add, I would just quickly add that it's basically both a push in and a pull out model, but go ahead, Laura. What does it look like in
so interventionists are teachers, they're specialists in their area. So a reading interventionist is a teacher who has additional training, expertise, and certification in that area. So that typically if somebody's struggling to learn how to read or needs a little extra support, the reading interventionist is the person that has that in-depth understanding and a higher level of expertise in the area.
How does it look like if you go and you look in the interventions, where are they? What are they doing on a daily basis? Can you elaborate a little bit, Laura, on what?
Yeah, so Lisa's
they
correct.
work with, how they work with the data teams that.
Right, they provide services to students within the classroom. They also pull students out of the classroom. And again, it's based on individual student needs. Sometimes they might work with a group of students. If there's a unique situation, they might be working for a short period of time with a student one-on-one. And they work with students all day long to provide those necessary services. And we really always, in the budget, try to be mindful of the power of early intervention. If someone is not on track or is struggling or has unique learning needs, we want to identify it early, remediate it, and then so the student is set up for future success as they move through the system.
Patty, do you want to add something?
It's similar, obviously, to what takes place at Hurlbut. As I said, all of our interventionists are teachers. Again, it's very focused work with students. We have data teams that meet 3-4 times a year. So we're really looking at students' individual progress or areas of weakness, and then building programs around that. They're working in small groups. They're working sometimes in classrooms. They're working sometimes even with just 1 or 2, but they're meeting all day working with students in our building.
And do you want to add anything?
Yes, and so we're mandated to have scientific research-based interventions, SRBI, by the state. That means at the tier 1 level, there are 3 tiers. Tier 1, we are to have strong instructional programs. We have the Readers Writers Workshop. We have a workshop approach in math as well. That's the classroom teacher differentiating with students. But using data, and this is something where the interventionists really focus, they look at the assessments that we have, and if there are students who are not meeting benchmarks, they will have small groups of students polled, and they'll work in small groups to try to get them back to up to speed as quickly as possible. And at the tier 3 level, it's, whatever strategy maybe not working at that point, they raise it to another level. They have more time and, fewer students working. So that's kind of how they work. They operate very data-based, interfacing with the teachers. But I will say, your question about whether we should have more classroom teachers versus these interventionists, we've looked, at that too, but our class sizes, we feel, very appropriate in terms of working with kids. But sometimes they just, need some smaller group support and more time to work through some skills.
One thing I want to add is that, you heard the principles, and I said we need to keep reiterating it. Tableau, the data analytics program, the interventionists have those licenses. So you can open it up, right, Dan DeVito, look at it and figure out what that child needs. So then when you're working one-on-one with them, all of the data is there. It's very, as Dr. Cross said, data driven. The other thing that might answer, like, why not just more teachers? We're very fortunate. It speaks to the level of degrees and the qualifications that our teachers have. I'm thinking of two particular interventionists that we have that work. One's at the intermediate school, one's between the middle school and the intermediate school. And one of them is actually certified not only in elementary ed, but also 7-12 math. That's really important because you get someone clearly with a passion for math that is able to also see the vertical articulation of the program. We have one at the intermediate school who her undergraduate degree was completely in math. She became an elementary school teacher. We want to capitalize on that staff. And when we talked about how we reallocated, Dr. Cross said, looking at specific staff, I'm like, wait a minute. Not to mention names. Adrienne has a degree in math from Boston College. She can do this intervention work because that's her area of expertise. So it's really finding the right people to do that critical work to be able to make the gains that we need.
Yeah, and Lisa, adding to that, on the reading side, there's actually a certification that's necessary. Either there's a reading specialist certification and a reading consultant, which is at an even higher level. All of our reading interventionists have those certifications that are required, and it provides us with an additional expertise. And if I could just, Melissa, one thing dawned on me going back to your last question about sustainability. In years past, we did track energy savings. We had a part-time energy consultant, and we looked at how that investment gave us savings year over year. We also looked at capital improvements, such as putting in flashometers and looking at the LED lighting through grants the state had to see what that saved us through energy costs. So I think, I don't know if there's other things like that potentially down the road we can look at, but that just dawned on me, so.
Oh, thank you for all those clarifications. I think that would be helpful, Ken. And I think that's the kind of thing we were thinking about. And thanks for the interventionist clarification. So I think that's helpful for all of us to understand. I wasn't sure. I didn't realize an interventionist was actually a teacher. I thought it was more of an aide or something like that. So this is good to know. Thank you.
Any other board members with questions this evening?
I have a question, and can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I have a question, and thank you so much for the presentation. It's been so helpful. I've been thinking about our momentum in the DEI space, diversity, equity, inclusion, and I was just wondering if there's a budgetary component to the work that we have planned to go forward and kind of where that fits in with the budget that we're looking at now.
I can start and others can jump in. When we look at, there are some specific I guess you see it in different areas kind of embedded. I know, for example, at the high school, there are some new courses that are specifically designed that address diversity. And one of them is the course on Black and Latino studies that's going to be offered. There are also, when we talk about the different kinds of literature that the students read in book clubs and different things like that, that is all embedded. The idea of having more diverse voices and different experiences. Last year, we had kind of a fun fact, about 30% of our overall reading material that we had at the secondary level was this new, more diverse, I guess you would call it, authors. And we have put funds into to increase that also in the area of our in our library media centers. The other thing I would say is when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, it also speaks to access for students of color, for students with disabilities, all different. And how can we be an inclusive climate? Or as you in the board, that was the phrase from you guys, the idea of honoring the uniqueness of every individual. And I think that is done in our Wingman program, for example, at the middle school, which we're very pleased to kind of be able to reinvigorate it now that we are in person. That was definitely an edge. The other thing is that we have increased in the area of human resources where we are advertising to get a more, if you will, diverse pool of applicants and to incorporate those kinds of questions in the interview process to be able to get a sense of the candidate and how the candidate, would bring that into his or her position, whatever it may be. I don't know if any of the principals want to add to any specifics.
I was just wondering, sorry, Bernadette, was your question really about what we're doing in DEI or whether there's new money allocated towards it?
This is kind of a combination of both. What do we have planned, and are we funding the plans, and where would we find that if we're looking through the budget?
Yeah, because I was going to say, in our we've had multiple public meetings about what we're actually going to be doing, but I think as this is a budget discussion, I'm curious about if your question's trying to get at is it costing us, what's it costing us to do this work?
What's it costing us? Are we allocating funds if we're going to need them to do the work well?
I would say that we have, like, for example, we have existing funds in materials. And when we look at the professional development, and that's all, that work is embedded in that. So for example, if we have allocated, it's not going to say in the budget, we have allocated $8,000 for DEI text. You won't see that, but you'll see the types of text that they're planning to do. The different courses, the choice that they're trying to provide in 12th grade for our English department and in our social studies. You'll see it, as I said, when you look at things about the PBIS funding of those stipends. If you just look at all of the 60 plus clubs at the high school and you go through the list, and maybe, Julie, I'm sure tomorrow can highlight some of them. Some of them are a direct outgrowth of students wanting that focus. Can you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, I was actually just going to add, we have a request for a new stipend to fund an advisor for our Weston Identity Alliance. It's been a club at the high school for several years. It's been known as the Weston Identity Alliance for the last few years, previously known as GLOW and the GSA. But it is a group of students that are committed to openly discussing LGBTQ plus issues. And they are very invested, and they have an advisor who is very invested in that. So that's just one example. We have several examples of student groups who are, committed to social justice issues and inclusivity. Christine Sincata and I meet monthly with some of those students. I know our student government organization also has an arm of their group that is very invested in this kind of work. So in terms of what Lisa has said, I think a lot of it is just embedded in the nature of our work, but certainly happy to highlight more of some of those examples.
Any other comments or questions? I have a bunch, but it really requires the budget book. So I'll wait for those for tomorrow. But I have one question for you, Lisa, and that's it more goes to how you approach the budget process with the administration, which is, at the end of the day, are you comfortable that you've allocated the resources that you need to allocate to achieve your goals? And also, are you comfortable that before we go to the taxpayers for additional monies, that you think that you created capacity to fund some of those things? Not everything can be done in 1 year, but I'm just wondering how you feel about the allocation against those things that are important, and whether you think that you were able to create some capacity internally to fund some of those things before we actually go and ask for more funds from our taxpayers.
I'm pretty comfortable with the budget. I think I'm pretty proud of the work that we did. I think it was important for us to really analyze, and we did, all of the staffing allocations. We spent considerable time, especially, and hats off to Dan Doak and his group at the middle school, looking at the middle school, looking at the schedule, looking at the needs of the students and how we could best meet them. And so the idea of reallocation and reduction was a long, thoughtful process, I guess I would say. I think we are building capacity. I think we're building capacity because of the coaching models and the really targeted look at certain key areas. If we don't measure it, it's not going to get done. And we're really committed to doing that, especially in the area of math. So I'm proud of the work that we're doing now and where we're going to that. And I go back to, when I look at the budget and I think like so much of it is the staffing, and to have analyzed the level we did of the people's roles and responsibilities and what they do, I do feel really comfortable with it. I remember, over the years when I was principal, we did lose staffing, and there were a lot of tough decisions that we had to make where, we reduced security guards, for example, we reduced some custodians, we reduced secretarial support and all of that. And I think that where we're at right now is where we need to be, as the minimal of where we need to be able to get what we need done. And I feel just so fortunate that we have the Esser money to really address those academic needs and the social emotional piece, because, the social emotional piece probably over the last 6 months, and people kept asking, I know Bernie kept asking, like, what about the social emotional? What about the social emotional? Just within the last, this last semester has really become challenging, especially at the secondary level. And I guess I would say I am so proud of the Alternative Pathways program, because we have found a way to be able to meet those students' needs and to be able to anticipate an increase that staffing. I don't know if I'm answering the question. I feel like I might be rambling at this point, but
we all ramble after 2 hours. Any other comments, questions from the board members? Well, this was a great start. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all the hard work. And we're all looking forward to continuing the discussion tomorrow morning and over the next 20 days before we approve the budget and pass it on to the Board of Finance.
9 o'clock, is that correct? 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock. And I would, in my view, I think, we should dig in earlier. What's happened in the past years is that we kind of build momentum and then we have to add more meetings. And so I think if we actually get a good start and dig in kind of early in the process and make as much progress as we can, it just will, it'll be, we won't have to actually then add more meetings as we proceed during the month. So, so until tomorrow, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, great. So meeting adjourned. See everyone tomorrow morning at 9.
No snow day, guys.
Thanks.